Hello fellow travelers! This time we'll look at floors 11 and 12 of Spiral Abyss that were changed with 3.5 update. Here's a quick reminder about general tips for Abyss, and let's get to the new stuff. Floor 11 now increases your pyro damage, and good thing about this buff is that it works for melt and reverse vaporize teams, because these reactions amplify your total damage after all buffs. First chamber includes Kairagi duo, followed by Consecrated Beasts duo we've seen in the previous version. As usual, the main time save against Kairagi is killing them both at the same time, otherwise when you kill one of them, the other one restores HP and buffs himself, becoming immune to control. Just distribute your damage equally between them and use heavy hitting attacks as a finishing blow. Freeze can also win you an additional second or two. As for beasts, they are not on floor 12 anymore, so they are less bulky this time, but still hit very hard and are extremely difficult to stagger. If you want to learn more about them, I explained how they work in details in the beginning of my previous breakdown. Mainly they have high resistance, especially to their own element, until you stun them by breaking the crystal they summon. Just make sure you have reliable elemental attacks to do so. In order to survive this part, you can rely on shields, healing, freeze, or just stick to ranged combat with taunts. And one more tip, Scorpion often stays in place casting AoEs around itself. You can simply leave it and focus on Vulture during this. If you struggle with them, just play it safe. In second half, we start with freeze combo from Eremites. The easiest way to fight them is to simply freeze them back. You can also rely on abilities that apply other elements to you, such as Burst of Bennett and Jin, to prevent freezing. Then we'll have to deal with 3 Hydro Mages. Dendro and Cryo make short work of their shields. Just rush to the one with an aura, others will teleport to you shortly after. And remember that your damage doesn't matter against shields, only elemental application does. It will be important later as well. Chamber 2 starts with another freeze team, this time from Fatui. They come in 2 waves. If you can't quickly kill the skirmishers, make sure to bring counter to their shields, but they shouldn't pose much of a threat with enough crowd control and AoE damage. As for girls, remember that Mirror Maiden has increased Hydro resistance, and Cryo Sissin mages can protect themselves with a Cryo Shield. Its durability scales with the number of alive Sissins they summon, but Sissins die easily, so AoE damage will help you here as well. The easiest way to fight them is to deal with Sissin mages first, dodging Mirror Maiden's attacks in the process. She's not that scary unless she hits you and gets into enhanced state. In the second half we have every type of Hydro Mimics except for Raptors, the flying ones. If you want to learn more, I explain their features and weaknesses in details in my guide for Oceanid. Pyro, Cryo, Geo and Electro will work great against them. Modified Hyperbloom or Burgeon teams with less or even no Hydro can also work well here. Mimics deal surprisingly high amount of damage, so make sure you are ready to tank it. For the final chamber we have 2 bosses. I have a video about Terror Shroom where you can find more details. Here I'll just remind you that the best way to fight it is to stun it using Quicken. There are 3 enrage attacks it can use before falling, and if it decides to go for a run, just restart the chamber and pray for better random if you want to save more time. As for Hydro Cube, Pyro will be your best bet here to deal damage, but adjusted Hyperbloom or Burgeon teams will also work. And Dendro is actually the best option when it comes to killing droplets. Cryo is the second best, so make sure to bring one of those for easy finish. Here's what we get in the end and the teams I used for this floor. I still had some time left in the end, even with these builds. Floor 12 this time got much harder. Comparing to last rotation, you definitely need more damage if you aim for 9 stars. In first chamber, both halves work the same. First you have to fight Eremite Elite with a couple of bodyguards, then deal with Abyss Heralds. I explained how Eremite Elites work in details in my previous breakdown. Their own element is the best against them, and luckily in both halves the same element is actually the best against respective Abyss Herald's shields. Freeze team is a good alternative for the second half if you don't want to deal with constant freeze from Eremites. Cryo works great against Herald's Hydro Shield too. In the beginning of each fight, run behind the elite enemy before starting your setup. Guards slack sometimes, but this way they synchronize and stick together. Cryo Herald can drain your stamina, but it's hardly impactful. Hydro Heralds, on the other hand, are much more annoying, because they move around a lot and can increase cooldowns of your abilities. If you rely on those to apply elements, care to dodge these two attacks. Otherwise, all of your active cooldowns will get 6 extra seconds if you get hit. And with 2 of these guys, it might slow you down significantly. Alternatively, you can protect yourself with a shield. Cooldown increase won't activate if you don't take damage. Here are teams that I had success with. Second chamber starts with Magu Kenki, and there is really nothing we could exploit here. Most of his attacks can be easily dodged with iframes, so just bring your best team. And try to avoid using abilities with fixed AoE. Kenki periodically dashes away during the fight. Pushing him against the wall seems to reduce the chance of that, but it still happens sometimes, and it might ruin your setups. And remember that even though you can't deal damage in the beginning, you can still generate energy. Same goes for his first big AoE cast. For the second half we have Black Serpents. They have increased physical resistance and resistance to their respective elements, so in terms of damage, Electro and Dendro will be the most reliable ones. AoE freeze teams are also good alternative for such annoying enemies. Black Serpents also heavily counter shields, gaining strong buffs if they hit a shielded character, so don't rely on them. Oh, and the new Geo guy protects his friends with a shield, blocking all attacks from the front, but he'll remove it if you just get behind him. Enemies in the second wave start pretty far from each other. As soon as they spawn, run behind Anemo Knight. This usually forces the other two to come closer to you. You can use something like this, for example. Last chamber starts with a single Ruin Guard with increased physical resistance, followed by Cryo Lava Churl duo with increased physical and cryo resistances. The best counter to Lava Churls is a team with a lot of pyro application to break their shields really quick. Ideally you want to do this before they start raging, but if they do, either deal a lot of poise damage to stagger them or bring strong shields or good healing to survive it. You have to deal with them in about a minute, because in the second half we have the Sandworm. In Abyss it doesn't use all of its attacks, and there seem to be certain patterns of what moves it uses during the fight. Plus it has reduced cooldown of bullet summoning move, but otherwise it's exactly the same, so check the full guide for more info. I'll just remind you that it has increased overall resistance, especially against Anemo, and the only way to reduce it is to pop Windbite bullets it summons with one of the elements you can swirl. Boss resistance towards used elements will be reduced while it's stunned. This is the best window to deal damage to it, that's why you have to leave about 2 minutes if you want to use 2 of these openings. Stick to teams that deal damage primarily with one of those 4 elements, like Mono Elemental, Vaporize, Melt or Aggravate teams. Characters that deal consistent damage or rely on short bursts will be able to push some damage with each opening. You'll get 3 or 4 of those each time before the big ones. Try to not rely on very long setups, and make sure to start them in advance, and ideally pop the bullets with the elements you deal the most damage with during big openings. Also remember that even though Anemo characters won't deal much damage here, they can reduce boss resistance even further and significantly boost your damage. Here are my teams for this chamber and their builds for power level reference. As for teams that could clear all of that in a single run, Pyro-based team for the first half and Aggravate for the second have the best chances, but they have to be pretty good for that. Anyway, that's all for now, fellow travelers. I wish you good luck with your runs and a great rest of your day. See ya!